Hello, Vincent. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Elisha. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. And like I mentioned earlier, thank you so very much for being here. I truly appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, and oftentimes,
And
Vincent, I
I,
love
I
to.
also wanted to thank I
Okay,
wanted to
okay.
thank you because I think the types of things that you do are so incredibly important, especially when we're talking
Thank
about
you.
allowing for the message of hope to get into the souls of individuals who come to listen to your message of hope.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for noticing that. Thank you. And you see, oftentimes, Vincent, I love to thank my guests for two main things. So, firstly, I want to thank you for investing in yourself. You see, Vincent, you are on this platform right now because you invested in yourself. And oftentimes, I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. You see, some months back, Vincent, I was on a particular road, and just by the roadside, there was this tall, unattractive mango tree. And I use the word unattractive because the mango tree's got no mangoes on it, and the leaves were all dry, and I just walked past it.
Hmm.
But you see, Vincent, just recently I was on that same road. And this time around, a lot's changed about the mango tree. The mango tree caught my attention pretty good from a distance. And immediately I got the urge to move so close to the tree, of which I did, and it wowed me. Because now, the mango tree's got a lot of mangoes on it, beautiful green leaves and healthy branches. But you see, not just mangoes, but ripe mangoes. So it was a beautiful moment that day. I was just staring at the beauty. It was an amazing one. Now my point is the fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming the amazing person that you are today. That alone has made it really impossible for me to skip you. And that's why you got the request from me to be on the show because I was attracted to your insights, your philosophies, and all that you're doing. It's amazing. So thank you so very much for investing in yourself. And secondly, thank you for saying yes to the invite. Because if Vincent had said nope, there was nothing I could do about it. Thank you so very much.
Well, look, as I mentioned, the types of things that you do, I think, are incredibly important because you really do bring hope to individuals and you facilitate that hope. And yeah, of course, with some humility, I say, yes, I've invested in myself. But, at the end of the day, I think our Creator has called us to be a witness
That's right.
to that which is important in life. And often we overlook that witness inside of ourselves. And so for you, I would not just with some humility say yes, but Elijah, you're also a very important piece of this entire
Thank you.
process. So thank you.
Thank you, man. You too. So let's get started. You see, I am quite excited to have you on the show today, Vincent, for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. I believe in order for one to transition from a terrible situation to that of a beautiful one, I believe it takes the application of knowledge. Not just knowledge, but the application of it. And you see, Vincent, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness means ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking because I do not want to remain in the dark. Yeah, so that's going to make our conversation today very, very important to me and even to the listeners. The second reason why I'm excited to have the amazing Vincent on the show is for the sake of the listeners. You see, Vincent, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got lots of
Yes.
information flying out there. Yeah, so these folks trust me for quality, eye-opening, good and, important information, of which I am totally convinced that our conversation is going to be insightful and impactful. So for that reason, Vincent, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or professional journey. We are just so curious right now. We want to know how you got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Vincent, over to you.
So it's very easy. I think I spent 37 years writing and negotiating logistical supply contracts, intellectual property contracts. And when I got to a very significant point, probably about the 30th year of doing that, I said, oh my gosh, on my deathbed, I really don't want to be known as someone who wrote contracts. I really want to look at the deeper issues in life and kind of begin to write and explore what some of those issues were. And so I went through a seminary program, not in order to become a minister, but really to figure out what kind of questions are being asked in a seminary. And then are those the questions that everyday people would want to hear?
Beautiful. Okay, but I would still want to know more. So when you got to the
Okay.
seminary, what were the stuffs that you discovered? Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things that I found fascinating was what we do with the Bible is we read it as if it's 2025, and we read it as if it is either a compliance manual that tells us what we should do, or we have this other notion that, okay, there's words in here that are going to apply for my current situation. And while that there are words that do apply to the current situation, I read the Bible for over 37 years as just a person who would wake up in the morning and ask the ultimate question, what does God want of me? And then I actually began to think a little bit deeper about it. If I were listening to the stories that were in the Old Testament, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and I heard them as opposed to read them, because we all agree that the stories originated out of what we call the oral tradition, which means there was a 2% literacy rate. So families would talk about the stories. And I said, if I heard them, would it mean something different than if I read it today? And then even more to the point, if I heard it in a very specific time period, wouldn't I naturally use those references in my own time period to interpret what eternal truths were embedded in those messages? And that was the whole starting point for my first book, The Greatest Story Never Told. But when I got to the second book, because that dealt a lot with the book of Genesis, when I got to the second book, the book of Exodus, I asked myself that very same question. And I did really, quite frankly, Elijah, what I was kind of trying to avoid to do. I said, there's no way around it. I've got to go through 3,000 years of pharaonic history and just figure out what was really going on inside of Egypt. And so the first segment of Pharaoh's Power, the book that I've just written, is really aptly right at the front. It says, why Egypt matters. And so let me tell you why I think Egypt matters if you're trying to read the Bible and the Torah. So the first part, pharaohs from the very first dynasty up through the 16th dynasty were deified upon their death, which means after they died, they became pharaoh, but of course they're dead and they've gone on to the other world. Well, what we see going on in the 15 BCE inside of Egypt is you have in the north a Hyksos pharaoh who is Semitic, who is bearded, who is Asiatic. Then in the 16th dynasty, south of the Nile Delta region, you had like 19 different operating pharaohs, all working more or less as commercial warlords, if you will. But you had also in the 17th dynasty, so you got 3 dynasties operating all at once, believe it or not. You had one pharaoh who was the traditional regnal king. And so what that dynasty, the 17th dynasty, said towards the end, we need a divine right to rule. And the only way that we're going to have a divine right to rule is if Pharaoh becomes the incarnate Amun-Ra, not when he's dead, but when he's born. And So I want to just put that as a backdrop because we think that the Moses event occurs around this time. And what do you see in the book of Exodus? Well, first of all, in Hebrew, the book of Exodus isn't named Exodus, it's named names, Shemot. In Hebrew, it means names. Now, if you read a book that's titled Exodus, what are you going to look for? You're going to look for an Exodus. And that's going to be the main portion of the story. But if you're reading a book entitled Names, you're going to be looking for something a little bit different. What do we have? In Exodus 1, we have well over 30 names or pronouns. In Exodus 2, Moses is adopted by an unnamed Pharaoh's daughter, and she wants him to be king, which wouldn't have happened in that environment. All good Egyptians knew that, but maybe someone living in Canaan wouldn't have understood that. In the 3rd chapter, Moses is introduced to the burning bush, and he kind of kvetches. He says, Lord, who am I that you're going to send me? I'm just a simple guy up here in the desert minding a few goats. Who am I? Well, we know who he was. He was the son of Pharaoh's daughter. But there's something very interesting in the 3rd chapter because he says to God, when I go to the children of Israel and they say to me, what is his name? What am I going to tell them? No one knows your name. And that's when we have the famous verse 14 where God says, I am who I am. Now, good enough. Moses goes to visit Pharaoh in the 5th chapter. And he says to Pharaoh, by the way, remember, Pharaoh is the living incarnate Amun-Ra. He says to Pharaoh, let my people go, that they may have a feast to me. And then Pharaoh asks the most obvious question. Who is this Lord, Jehovah, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I don't know of this God, nor will I let Israel go. Quite frankly, Pharaoh could have given no other answer, which is why the book is titled Historical Fiction in the Bible, because it's not about the Exodus. At this point now, if you understand that flow of context, we have a representative of Jehovah or Yahweh who is now visiting the incarnate Amun-Ra, and he's saying, I'm here representing a God you've never heard of. What is Amun-Ra going to say? Sure, go take a couple of days off? No, on the contrary. But the more astounding part, quite frankly, that I find totally fascinating is in Exodus, the 6th chapter, verse 2, God appears to Moses and says this, by my name, Yahweh, I did not appear to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but I only appeared as El Shaddai, or warrior God, the name warrior God. But by my name, Yahweh, I was not made known to them. Elisha, I negotiated contracts 37 years. If I would have found that little piece of information out after I already began negotiations, I would have said to the principal, why are you leaving me out on a limb? I should have known that before you sent me in. What do we have? We have an entire civilization of people who could not have known the name Yahweh because God himself tells Moses after his first visit, there's no way that those people know who I am, nor would Pharaoh have known who I am. Now, what is the entire point of this story? I think the entire point was for us to hear that story and then ask questions. The most obvious questions. Who is Yahweh? Who is God? that I should obey his voice? I mean, me personally, in 2025. What if he tells me to do something that I don't agree with? What if he tells me something that seems impossible? Do I try to come up with my own solution? And so I think one of the more fascinating parts of both my first book and my second book, Pharaoh's Power, is that maybe aptly illustrated yesterday when I was explaining to a colleague. I gave him a copy of the book. He says, okay, tell me what's in it. And I gave him a brief overview. And so we get to the end. He says real quickly, yeah, but I want to know, Pharaoh's heart was hardened by God. Did you talk about that? And I said, no, nor would I, because it's important for you to talk about it. And he says to me something important. He says, yeah, but I don't know what to think about that. I struggle with that. That's the beauty of Torah. That's the beauty of the Bible. We're supposed to struggle with that type of question. We're supposed to talk about it. We're supposed to think about it when we wake up in the morning. We're supposed to think about it before we go to bed. What if God hardens my heart? Am I ever able to unharden it? What do we do? What does our Creator want from us? Is our Creator also our Redeemer? And so I make it very clear. I don't try to answer questions. I just want us to ask those important questions about our life.
Amazing, Vincent. You see, I love the fact that you went deeper. And that's truly how we should view the Bible, God's Word. We should not just take it literally, but we should ask questions. And it's amazing how you've answered almost all of my questions. So let us talk about the Torah for a moment. So is the Torah still relevant till today?
Absolutely. I got to tell you. But I would say this, because one of the things that I really tried to, I think, debate in my mind was, am I advocating a new way to read the Bible? I don't think so. But I think I'm advocating for a new way for us to have conversations that are in the Bible. So, for example, Sunday school has become rather boring for a lot of people because it's the same old thing.
That's right.
And, how do we liven it? I think we liven it by, perhaps coffee and a few cookies on Sunday morning, and then asking, okay, what does our Creator expect of us? When we have family members who are living immoral, what do we do? When we're together in unmoral circumstances, what do we do? When I have a choice to make it work, do I file my taxes appropriately, or do I find ways to skimp along the edges? What do we do? And the Torah outlines these questions very specifically, that I think there's no one answer. Elisha, there would be perhaps an answer for you, I think, and then there might be a different answer for me, especially when we're talking about what does it mean when God hardens someone's heart. Could we have differing opinions about what that means? But the getting out to talk about it, if my ideas are wrong, if I blurt them out and they are wrong, they're going to be evident to me inside, and I'll probably have to rethink what I think about an issue.
I got that. That's so correct, Vicent. That's true. Okay, it has been an amazing moment with you on the show, Vicent. To bring this to an end, what would you like to leave the audience with, like a final thought? And to those folks who would like to reach out to you, get your book, learn more about all of these things that you've shared with us, or even ask questions, how can that be possible?
Yes, I can be reached at info@vincentkrivda.com. Look, I don't claim in this book to answer questions. I think what I've done is raised the questions. And the question ultimately is the Bible a compliance manual? Or do these stories lead us to guide our thought process? And I'll leave it with this. Abraham passed off his wife Sarah, as his sister, and 2 times, according to the Torah, and 1 time to the Philistine king Abimelech. And Abimelech asked the most important question when he found out what Abraham did and how treacherous a thing it was that Abraham did. He asked Abraham, what was it about my character that you thought that this should be something that you should expose me to? When you think about that question that Abimelech asked Abraham, instead of viewing Abraham as the hero of the story, you can look at him just like you and I. Men who have some failings, men who have some struggles in life, and men who ultimately are not gods, but we answer to God, and we can ask these questions and understand that the heroes and the champions in the Bible were flawed, just like you and I, but our Redeemer is also our Creator.
Beautiful. Got that. Got that. That's a deep one. So that's going to be the end of the show, Vincent. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing this amazing stuff with us. It means a whole lot. Thank you
Elisha,
so very
thank you
much,
very
brother.
much for having me. Okay.